Hi, Anas. I'm glad that you're here. We were able to come and join us today. So, Anas is the CEO of Innoviews, and you have 15 years of international experience in architectural and facade engineering. I don't think I've met many people with that background. And what Innoviews works with is providing technology that enables existing building facades to be upgraded with the latest energy saving and smart glass innovations without removal, replacement, or disruption.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that? What is it that you really do?
Well, first, thank you for having me. Really pleasure to be here. And as you said, Innoviews in a few words developed a technology that dramatically cuts the cost of upgrading building facades and windows, whether for energy or non-energy purposes. And the core IP or the core technology is that you don't have to replace or throw away the existing systems. Basically, we developed a way where you can continue to use what's existing and then kind of upcycle and improve and incorporate the latest technologies without having to put in a single screw or remove or drill or alter any existing components.
So, you don't have to remove the windows?
Absolutely not. So when you look at it this way, we're basically utilizing almost 70% fewer materials, less material than a replacement, completely replaced system. So the cost on the material side is dramatically lower. The installation, it's non-invasive, so there's no disruption. You can be, for example, sleeping behind the windows, will be working outside, complete no disruption. And because it's a very fast installation process, also the labor cost is much lower. And we avoid disruption costs. We avoid having to take the materials and put it in landfills, so it's a much more sustainable solution. So if you loop in all of this, you'll find that now we can address one of the biggest components in a building that leaks energy dramatically in a cost-effective way, and have it be considered as an energy conservation measure, such like LED lighting or heating, cooling system upgrades, things like that. So we reduce the payback period from 100 years sometimes on certain projects to as low as 3 years. So that's kind of the core value proposition of what we're doing.
Interesting. So, we're just closing on a house right now, and we just did an inspection. And one of the things we found out was that the seal was had been lost in some of these windows, right? So, how would it actually work with your technology? Like, if I know this is mostly for commercial use, but if we were to replace or fix the windows in our house, what would your solution actually do? How would it do that?
So those windows you're talking about probably have reached the end of life, around 20 years old, probably something like that.
Actually, not. It's
even
less. Yeah.
So that's
10
the
years
standard.
old.
Yeah, that's the standard.
Sounds like a warranty claim.
Yeah.
I mean, the warranty lasts till 10 years. That's
Yeah.
the standard, but you have that 10 to 20.
Yeah.
That's where things start to show up.
Yeah.
And the reason is because, as you said, the perimeter seal lost its integrity over time. And what happens, basically, moisture goes into the cavity and then it starts to form, and you have those kind of fogging that happens inside the windows. Typically, right now, you'll have to replace them. There are no ways to fix them. However, one of the kind of adjacent or secondary benefits to our technology is if you add our system on top as an exterior retrofit, you can extend the lifespan of these, they call them insulating glass units, by up to 3 times. So from 20 to 60 years.
Okay.
Wow.
We've done deep analysis on that and simulation. And then recently we did a project where we just retrofitted 1 floor of a 3-story commercial building. They had double pane windows. We turned them into triple pane on the first floor with our system. And what they found over the past winter, the second and third floor, maybe 1/3 of the windows start showing condensation. So they start to fail. And they wanted us to replace them. We told them the first floor didn't have any condensation at all within those existing IGUs. So that kind of confirmed our research and analysis. Basically, you're creating a new weather barrier that helps mitigate this kind of failure issue that happens after 20 years, because you're reducing what they call delta T, the difference in temperature across that window. So it takes 3x the delta T, 3x the difference between whatever the temperature set point inside and the temperature outside to show this fogging inside the window.
Mm.
So that's kind of one of the examples.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm very curious because I think there's a very technical solution in terms of saying we're going to reduce heat loss. But
Yeah.
I think one of the things that you do seem to emphasize is facade. And I'm assuming it's also a good looking solution. And I'm
Yeah.
curious how important that is to the customer.
Absolutely. So you look now at the
Mhm.
commercial real estate market. It's very challenging times. Building owners are trying to stay competitive. There is something called like a flight to trend, a
Mhm.
flight to quality trend,
Mhm.
where buildings that are built recently, a couple of years old, will attract the most tenants, and then you're left with the older ones, unfortunately. And sometimes these older ones are really performing well. They've made a
Mhm.
lot of upgrades,
Mhm.
but still the appearance, the image, and the perception of this building in the minds of the public, it's still like it's an older building, not performing well, and all that. So one of the things that could be done with our solution, because you're creating this kind of new facade layer,
Mhm.
is you can improve the aesthetics of the building.
Mhm.
So you're not only getting the benefits of lower energy consumption, lower carbon emissions, better thermal comfort and acoustic comfort for the occupants, but also you get an opportunity to change the appearance completely of the building, modernize it,
Mm.
include some of the latest glass technologies, glass colors, frit patterns, designs, things
Wait,
like that.
what's a frit pattern? I don't know what that means.
So I don't know if you saw like when you print on the glass,
Uh-huh.
and then you have different shades. Sometimes these could be little dots that start very opaque, and then they start to
I have these
get
like on my
less
car.
dense.
Okay. Yeah.
So it gives it this kind of translucent look, and helps also with the glare reduction and things like that. There's a lot of when it comes to design and color and look, there's a lot of options that could be now available without having to rip out your entire facade and vacate the building completely and replace everything existing.
Yeah.
So
So each piece of that value proposition is really impactful, right? It's the no
Exactly.
disruption is valuable
Yeah.
on its own.
Yeah,
The new facade is valuable on its own. And oh, by the
Exactly.
way, you get to save energy. Like,
exactly.
triple
So
threat.
there are many use cases to our technology. One of them is energy, but there's a lot of other drivers. Thermal comfort could be sometimes the primary driver. You have tenants threatening to leave, for example. They're feeling too hot in the summer, too cold in the winter. They're not able to really occupy the space. Productivity of people gets dramatically lower when you're not comfortable, and that's something that owners really care about. So with a very simple solution, you can retain your tenants, keep your occupancy levels high, and be more competitive in the commercial real estate market. Yeah.
So I was in New York last week, and I noticed there were a lot of new buildings that are just like, I think this is the new kind of aesthetics trend, is just like glass,
Whole glass, yeah.
right? All glass. And I was wondering, like, how environmentally sustainable is that? Like, is there more energy loss when these buildings are just glass?
I mean, currently the technology of glass itself or the facades have come a long way in terms of performance. So you can get glass that kind of as insulative as walls, normal walls. The challenge, however, is that that's not the case for a lot of the older buildings. When in the 1980s, 90s, there was this construction boom. Cost was the number one driver. Unfortunately, sustainability or kind of energy efficiency was not really a main driver for decisions that are made and material selections and systems. So that's why there is a huge section of the built environment that is really unsustainable now. It's very energy inefficient. Still, when you're looking at recently built commercial buildings, you have still different performance levels, because you have the building code mandating a certain level of performance, kind of the minimum required, but that could still be not the kind of goal that people should aspire to in terms of these kind of huge buildings that are like energy hogs, really. So it's then from that point up to the owner and how sustainable they want their buildings to be, to improve the performance of the building. And at the same time, you still have technologies being developed today. New technologies will be coming available in a few years. So you're always, the building code and architects and the kind of the building environments and engineers are pushing the bar up to incorporate these technologies, increase the kind of minimum requirements under the building code. And another advantage of our solution is that we really tackled the crux of the problem, which is that building facades and windows, they're not designed to be upgradable. You're designing them, they're installed. After 20 years, throw away the glass. Well, this is not really the case, should be in a sustainable society. So we designed a technology that's easily upgradable. It's like you have a renewable facade retrofit system or window retrofit system. And what that does is that building owner today can install what's the cutting edge technology, and then 5 years from now they can upgrade, just swap out part of our product and incorporate the recent latest high performance technology at that time without having to replace the existing facades or even our entire system. So you have this kind of upgradability feature is really key to address this in the future. So 5 years, 10 years from now, you can still integrate and improve the performance of your building.
Oh my gosh, I know what's going to happen. There's going to be rentable facades. That's what's going to happen.
We were thinking about that hey, like right now, Apple, for example, you can get the latest phone every couple of years and you pay us monthly.
Get an upgrade plan, yeah.
Yeah, so there's like an upgrade plan where you get the latest technologies every 5 years. And this way, it's more like a kind of a Windows as a service type model. And there's no upfront cost, so no big investment required at the beginning, and you get the immediate benefits, reduction in your energy bills dramatically, and you can kind of show your customers or your tenants that they're feeling happier, more comfortable, lower energy bills, and more sustainable building.
Yeah, you can see how for with commercial, especially at retail, how if the look of a store really matters.
Yeah,
in a way that's different from office space where that's suddenly a benefit now we can really tailor the facade in a new way because it's a kind of a pay-as-you-go model, right?
Yeah
So it's interesting how technology can change how we think of business, right?
Exactly.
No, I'm curious, how did you stumble on this idea? How did it all came to be?
So my background, I'm an architect and facade engineer, and since my early days in architecture school, I had this kind of really deep interest in kind of smart facades, dynamic facades, adaptable facade systems. And my first kind of serious attempt was my bachelor's degree project. And it ended up winning kind of a major international architectural graduate award. And because of that, when I graduated, instead of going through the traditional route of kind of working for an architectural firm, I joined a kind of a national facade fabricator. And from there, I started learning about kind of the technical aspects of how these systems are engineered, how these systems are manufactured, tested, designed, built, all of that. I then moved to Dubai, worked there for about 4 years for a multinational kind of fully integrated glass and facade manufacturing company. And in the R&D department, kind of really designing these bespoke systems for super high-rise buildings. After that, I kind of went back to the architectural field, but been kind of focusing also on facade, but from the architect's perspective. So have developed this kind of unique multidisciplinary experience that's kind of rare to find. You're either an architect or a facade engineer or a facade systems designer. So that really helped me tackle what now is the problem or the kind of the thesis for interviews. Now, in between those, the idea that kind of sparked initially was that how can we change the windows to integrate the latest technologies, make them smart without having to replace anything? It was not about energy efficiency, to be honest, because I did not realize that there was a big problem when it comes to facades. Architects focus mostly on new construction. So you're building a new building to the highest standards. We didn't really focus much or try to study a lot the built environment, the existing building sector, and know how big of a problem is the energy efficiency when it comes to windows. So when I started looking for solutions to integrate, smart technologies into existing facades, I stumbled upon, this kind of energy efficiency problem. I remember seeing, a thermal image showing the skyline of New York City.
Mm.
And it was so striking to see how much heat loss happens through building envelopes. It's really, an image that speaks 1,000 words.
Yeah.
And
was this in the winter? Or?
That was in the winter.
Yeah.
So it's like really perfect time to show this.
Yeah.
And that got me, into trying to research more this kind of building stock and why is that? And that's when I learned that about 40% of all buildings today still have single pane windows. These are like one single layer. And half of the remaining 70% have the lower performing early version of double pane windows. So you're talking about 70% of the building stock is energy inefficient, have obsolete facade systems and window systems. So it's a huge problem. That's where we start kind of focusing our solution on addressing this problem with InnoViews.
It's funny with the heat because like until you see the data, sometimes you don't realize how big it is. But I think you were in Boston. Everyone knows if you're in front of a cold window in winter, and even if it's cold, you feel it on your skin, or you're just like, oh, I'm sure you felt that in Norway too, right? But it's like seeing it in numbers, really reveals this is a real big challenge. Right?
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. No, exactly that. I was thinking in our apartment in Norway, it was we know we didn't have really good windows, and one of them like in the winter would be just like freezing, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure there was a lot of heat loss.
Yeah. And I guess what makes now the time to introduce this technology? Because I think we've kind of known that that old windows and old stuff is just not very energy efficient. But like, what's really catalyzing your growth today?
Yeah, that's a great point. Believe it or not, when I was like doing the early research in 2016, and I was kind of diving into what cities are trying to do, what their plans are for the kind of energy efficiency of existing buildings, and I was able to see, for example, now I don't know if you heard of the local law 97, for example, in New York. It's a major law capping fossil fuel emissions from buildings and consumption, and it's going to kick in January 2024. Building owners will be facing really steep fines if they don't, upgrade or improve the energy performance of their buildings. This was kind of highlighted and talked about in 2016 that was the plan. Going forward, this is what we're going to be doing. And here are the steps to get to that point, because you cannot really mandate that immediately. So public benchmarking laws and energy benchmarking was kind of a precursor to that. So I was able to see where cities are heading and how this is going to become kind of a perfect time where cities are kind of mandating, and at the same time, energy utilities are offering significant incentives to encourage building owners to do retrofits. And now you look at kind of the, political environment in general, and what countries are trying to do, and the carbon emission goals and the net zero goals. Cities kind of, focusing or kind of targeting net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050. So all of this is creating a perfect environment for energy efficiency technologies. You have at the same time, this is on the public side. You have the private sector as well, with ESG kind of targets and goals, environmental, social, and governance. You have the investors of these customers, or the investors of building owners. They're mandating that they need to be at a certain level of performance. And even public companies that occupy these spaces, they have now certain sustainability plans that are they're required to report on the performance of their portfolio of buildings and their entire carbon footprint. So they're either mandating the owners to upgrade, or they will be leaving to other more sustainable and energy efficient properties. So you have all this kind of market pressure and incentives offered to really catalyze this kind of energy efficiency movement. And most recently with the Inflation Reduction Act, now there is like on a federal level, like tax incentives, tax deductions that could be really significant to building owners if they improve and upgrade whether the windows or other building components to improve the energy efficiency.
Okay.
So I believe it's really the perfect time for these technologies.
So your solution could benefit from the IRA.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So people could get their money back, or like
exactly. So tax deduction, you get up to $5 a square foot of building area if you improve the performance of your building by over 25% of your last year performance, and then you can kind of file that with your tax return next year. You'll need sort of like an energy engineer to kind of certify that, and then it's a very simple kind of process. Yeah. So that's a tax deduction. There are, if you incorporate some of the advanced technologies or smart glass technologies, you get an incentive tax credit. And that could be up to 30% of the total cost of integrating or upgrading your facade or windows. So it's a big deal as well.
Yeah, that's a big driver. So I know you have IP and patents that kind of cover this. Did you ever expect yourself to be an inventor?
Not really, but I always like to kind of develop new ways of tackling certain problems. So this kind of creative process, it's an integral part of an architect's experience. So every architect I consider an inventor.
What was it like kind of going through the application process and really building a portfolio?
It was like a black box. Unbelievably tough. It's really difficult but necessary for any startup founder to, if they have IP or think they have IP, to really understand exactly how things works and how patents work. And because the way you describe your technology impact the protection or the how protectable it is. And so I remember at the first couple of years, I kind of studied patent law over time, just to kind of learn how to talk to attorneys, IP attorneys, and how to explain to them what we're trying to do, what the claims needs to be, how to describe the specs, and what to include, what not to include, things like that. Understanding the prior art and what's available before, what you need to research. It was interesting to see it. But it was like the entire language use is like kind of different than English, even it feels to you. So it's like really a big kind of unknown, and takes time. Was time consuming to go through it, but it was very, very, very beneficial. I can tell you now, worth every minute I spent.
Yeah, and you have international patents as well, and you've was that PCT process?
Exactly.
How did you make the decision of like? Because you can't patent everything everywhere. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
What was that calculus for you?
It was a strategic decision. Basically, you need to know where you are today. What are your beachhead markets, and what are the top markets that you think your solution would be most needed? As you said, you cannot patent everywhere. You need to see also which countries have strong patent protection and enforceability of the patents, because otherwise you can patent your invention in a country, but it's not going to make you any benefit. So we had to go through and really put a plan towards what's important now, what's important in the future, how cost effective can things be. We had to avoid or skip certain countries, even though we knew that there could be interest there, but it was not a big market and not a very close or immediate market for us. At the same time, there are things where you can continue. So from the day one you file, you can file a provisional patent that gives you almost a year to continue to work on your invention. From that year, you file a PCT, and from that time, you have some grace period as well before you go into certain countries. I forgot if it's a year more or less. So that's kind of 2 years to gives you enough time to really understand where you want to focus first, kind of refine your go-to-market strategy, understand your market segments and verticals, and then file accordingly. So
and I remember it was always challenging because it's like $10,000 to $20,000, like kind of to really get it done correctly, because you have to hire the lawyers.
Yeah,
and if you're doing
it can be way more than that.
Yes, minimum.
If you're not involved,
yeah,
it can go up to 60 or 100K easily.
And then the thing they don't tell you is the maintenance fees that come after that.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
like suddenly you think it's an asset, but in some ways it becomes a liability because
Of
you've already
course.
invested so much in
Yeah.
the filing initially.
Yeah. And
I was a little bit of tangent. I was mentoring someone working on reviewing applications for the Rice Energy Tech Forum that's coming up, and we were looking at a business, and he goes, "Oh, I really like this business. They got like 13 patents." And I said, "Well, they're not really that good because they don't make any money. So what's the patent really worth, right?" And so I guess as you go through this process, how do you kind of communicate to investors like this is a meaningful portfolio, or do they just pay attention to the financials? I mean, how do you balance that?
I mean, look, having patents is absolutely
Mhm.
beneficial. And it's one of the most important points that investors look at. And the reason is because they want to make sure that you have some sort of competitive advantage against your
Mm.
competitors, that they're not going to invest in you today and someone is going to just, copy you tomorrow and be in the market before you or have more
Mm.
resources where they can really execute better. So patents is one of these kind of barriers to entry that you
Yeah.
can have in your under as one of the things you have. The challenge is that as a startup company, you really can't enforce it.
Yeah.
Even if
Yeah.
someone goes out and try to copy it, you don't have the financial resources to really sue them.
Yep.
Still, you can use it, and once you have stronger investors behind you, you'll be able to really have the deep pockets to at least make whoever is trying to copy you think twice before going to market.
Mm.
Right.
So having a strategic investor, for
Yeah.
example, in our case, is like a big deal because
Mm.
they're like a global company, and if they want to protect this or they're interested, they can, and
Yeah.
whether financially or just with their army of
Yep.
patent attorneys and lawyers. The other thing is that it's hard to put like a dollar amount. I once heard that every patent
Yeah.
is like valued at $1 million in your valuation.
Oh, I would just
And-
file patents all the time. That's all it took. Yeah.
So not sure how true that is. I just heard it once. It was interesting to kind of hear this, but the more patents you have, the more protection, because it's
Mm.
all about patent claims, and the more broader your claims can be, the more protection against different use cases, different modifications, different alterations. Your patents cover that kind of use case. At the same time, when you're looking to potentially exit the company and
Mhm.
sell the company, the IP or intellectual property is considered like a really big asset and increase your valuation.
Mm.
And you can also license these patents, so
Mm.
you might not make money at the beginning off of those patents. You might still be in kind of an R&D mode or technology development mode, but you can see that in a couple of years, your business model is basically just to license your IP,
Mm.
license your technology, and someone else will be fabricating or executing or bringing the technology to market.
Yeah.
So that's also a very effective and kind of common business model in deep tech, hard tech,
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
capital intensive. Basically, a startup cannot do it on their own.
And did you find because you're kind of like an untrodden ground in terms of developing this technology and concepts, did you find that it was kind of hard to even have prior art to reference because you were like so far ahead, if that makes sense?
There's always
There's
prior
always
art.
prior art. Okay.
There's always
Alright.
prior art, and you're required to include everything you find. And I think it's good process to not just rely on your patent attorney to search for prior art, because if you're the inventor, you absolutely is the best person knowledgeable on your invention. So you exactly know, in the process, people might send you, or when you're doing due diligence with investors, and if they're institutional investors, they might bring outside counsel to review patents and share with you maybe some kind of prior art. And you really need to understand the differences and need to understand what's unique in your technology that's different from others, and be able to tell exactly whether that's completely outside the scope. There might be certain keywords, there might be certain aspects that seem similar, but they're completely different. It's very common. On the surface, yeah, and I've been in that kind of place many times.
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing a window retrofit. So here's a window retrofit. Here's a
Yeah.
product similar. And then you dive deeper into what components are included, what not included, what's different about your claims and methods and systems. So that's important to know as well.
No, I always think these discussions on IP are interesting and wonder sometimes if our focus on them so early on in a company startup is really warranted, right? Because building a startup is so much more than just a product that you have.
Of course.
It's building a whole business model around it and taking it to market. And often that's where most startups fail.
100%.
So kind of, yeah, I mean, what's your experience having gone through that? I guess it's a balance, right? That you have to have some kind of protections in place.
Yeah.
But then you actually have to make the whole business model work, have to go to market, and there's probably more protections that you can do later on once you've proved that there is a product market fit.
Oh, of course. I mean, for the first year or maybe even 2 years, I didn't file anything. And the idea is that as long as there's nothing publicly shared that really describe how you can make this technology, I mean, you don't have to file patents immediately because the idea, and even sometimes people are afraid you can put, a pitch deck could become public, but the pitch deck, if you have a slide showing, some aspect of your product, a skilled person in the art is not going to be able to remake that technology just out of just one slide.
Yeah.
So you'll need to have maybe a spec sheet released or a more detailed, fabrication drawings and things like that could invalidate your right to file a patent for whatever you're working on. But for the first part of the technology development for a company, they can keep it inside and not share anything publicly or just very, very basic stuff. And 100% agree that it can be time consuming and costly at the beginning, where you might not have any investment or you're putting your own money on the line, and you don't want to do that. And at the same time, you can still file provisional patents. These provisional patents, they cost under $1,000. You can do it. Or even have an attorney. You can just file basically a paragraph or a couple paragraphs with nothing other than that, and establish a priority date for you, and then that gives you about a year. And there's a process where you continue to file provisionals every time things change and things improve, and get these kind of different priority dates that you can reference back in the application.
So you moved to Houston from Boston. What kind of triggered that move? And was it, thinking that the market here is perhaps better for your product, or?
Well, to answer that, you'll have to look at the move before that. So I'm originally from Syria. So when I graduated, I moved to Dubai, worked there for like 4 years, and then moved to Boston to do my master's degree there. So when I was in Boston, I was not like, I was still a foreigner. And when you're a foreigner, you don't have a lot of the resources that, the people in the country here have, your garage or your parents' home, or where you can kind of bootstrap your way out of things. And it was very expensive to kickstart the company, in Boston for me, because, I was full-time student. I was a full-time, kind of employee at a firm, and I was just barely able to kind of work on this or, overtime or during weekends. And I did that for the first year, but then after a year, I realized that, the technology seems feasible. It can happen, can work, and it's now time to really devote all my time to it. So I had to quit my job, and we had family here in Houston. So we moved in with them and cut expenses to almost nothing and afforded to work another year full-time on this until it became kind of investable. It was still idea on paper, but I convinced my architectural school that I wanted to do my thesis on this. It was too technical for a traditional architectural thesis, but I told them, I really don't have time to do two. Yeah, it's going to be either this, I'm going to, drop out. So they said, yeah, we'll give you the green light, do whatever you want to do. And that got me another year to work on it. And then thesis research book became the first early research book for the technology, and that's how when I went through the Central Texas Angel Network, that's all I had, this kind of early research book, and that's how I was able to raise some money on it.
So you raised through CTAN.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay. Yeah.
that was in 2018.
Yeah.
That was our first kind of convertible note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Did you find so when I went to raise through CTAN, I felt they really wanted to see cash flow in my business, but I also raised in 2014. So like, how did they approach a hard tech company like yours?
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not like in the Bay Area where you're basically, if you have a really good potential idea and technology and you're early stage where you don't have any revenue, you don't have any cash flow, you can raise really significant amount of money. But still in Austin, it's a really startup friendly fundraising environment compared to other parts of Texas. That's at least my personal experience. So we weren't able to get like hundreds of angel members. Obviously they're looking for more mature companies, or at least companies that are in a place where they have some traction. But there were a lot of angel investors that saw the opportunity, saw the vision, and really took a leap of faith and basically invested. And what they did, they said, we're going to put half of what we're planning to put now, and the money I was raising is basically to do third-party lab testing, because I couldn't afford to do it on my own, and we needed money for it. And the promise is that if we succeed in these lab tests, then they can double down on their investment, and that's what happened. So we got the first tranche of money, went through the test over the course of 3 to 6 months, then finished that successfully. We were able to raise and double down. And then that kind of helped me establish credibility and show investors that, hey, here's traction, here's where we are. We started with an idea on paper. We now have a fabricatable product. We do prototypes. We do testing. So it was kind of milestone-based funding instead of raising a big round all of a sudden upfront. So that was kind of my journey.
Yeah,
with
my first seed round was with the Houston Angel Network, and they wanted to tranche it as well. And so I think it's very much a Texas thing in my experience. Yeah. Interesting. Actually, I don't know much more about your fundraising journey. Yeah. So we know you raised angel capital, and you said 2018.
Yeah.
And so where have you, and you now have a corporate investor as well.
Yeah, we have now multiple VCs.
Okay.
But I started with just a few. It started actually with just one angel investor, and it was. I went through the Clean Tech Open Accelerator, one of the largest for clean technology company. And I was fortunate enough, I ended up winning the national award for it. It was the first out of Texas to win this award. And through that process, they assign like a team of mentors for you. There are local, there are ex-founders, ex-CEOs, or investors. And one of the members on that team was an angel investor at the Central Texas Angel Network. It was a former board chair at the CTAN network. And over the course of 6 months of the program, we got, to develop this kind of relationship where, I present to them things and they comment on it, the business model, business plan, everything. It was like a mini MBA program over 6 months. I had no idea what, like an executive summary is or a business model. So all of that. So at the end of the 6 months journey, I went through CTAN and applied and everything. It was the end of the year, I think 2017. So you have that Q4 kind of round. So it was near the holidays, everything dies off. And with angel groups, you need a lead investor. And kind of to help lead the deal and do the due diligence. So there's a lot of work. And, holidays and everything, no one wanted to be a lead out of the members that expressed interest. And this angel investor who was a mentor also, cannot become a lead because he's like, he knows a lot about the company already. So he's not going to be able to really do a great job at, due diligence. So what happened is that we finished the Q4, no lead was identified. And it was a very challenging moment in the journey that, I was telling my wife, by the end of January, if we don't secure any funding, I'll start looking for jobs because, you can't continue. It's been already a 1 year journey with no income. So what happened, we went through the final competition for Cleantech Open. That was around the end of January, mid-January. We won the first place, and you get a $50,000 check. And at the time, this angel investor told the rest of the group, "Hey, I'm investing. I'm not going to wait for you guys to find a lead or you kind of go through this deal. I'm putting in my first check." So he put a $50K. We got another $50K, and that was like the first $100K. It was really like great. So when the announcement happened, we won the national award, and then saw that this angel investor, who was really well respected within the group, put in money. So others followed on, and we got other investors now. And you can say we skipped the entire due diligence process to a degree. We still had to go through basic stuff, but no main lead investor was identified. So we had to set terms, basically, me and the angel investor, and then the other members liked the terms, and then they kind of came in on the convertible note. So that was the first tranche, about $250,000. After that, we did another $500,000 the following year, and that's when we started getting some institutional investors. We had Saint-Gobain, which is one of the largest global building technology companies, building products, materials companies, invest, and that was through the Greentown Labs because they had sort of like a competition. Went through, ended up being selected. Worked with them for a few months, did our first pilot with them, and then
that was a Greentown launch program, probably.
Exactly.
It's now rebranded as Go, but
program. Exactly. So that was really, really helpful. So that's where we got the kind of second milestone-based convertible note that was dedicated to doing pilots, or like kind of the first real installation on an actual building. Same thing, we did it, succeeded. And then we raised a seed round in 2021. That was like a $2 million round, oversubscribed. It was 1.5. Then we pushed it to 2, and then we sold every single share. We raised $2,044,000. We couldn't raise any more because we already extended it a couple of times. But at that time, we had a paid customers for these kind of small paid demonstrations or pilots. We had traction. We had a bigger team. We had installations that have been successful, testing, some institutional investors behind us. So it was much easier to go through it. And now we're looking to raise a Series A to kind of, go scale and start, doing these big deals and big projects and venture out of the kind of demonstration and pilot phase. Yeah.
So where were most of these investors from?
Well, it's all over the U.S. basically. We have several members, a lot of members from the Central Texas Angel Network. We have a VC based here. We have another angel group in Seattle, E8, and became E8 Ventures. We have from Boston. We have Nova, which is Saint-Gobain venture arm. We have a number of other investors, for all over the U.S. We have also international investors as well, kind of smaller VC funds from Singapore. So.
And this was, you were raising during COVID. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So how was that experience? Did it make it easier?
It was not easy, but luckily we had some traction to really rely on, but definitely not easy. 2021, however, was much, if you look at the current fundraising environment, is dramatically easier than now.
Yes.
A lot of people were able to still raise in 2021. Now VC funding or VC money kind of dried up, and you have a lot of competition, a lot of startups seeking this small pool of VC money now. And
there's more demand
than
there's supply.
So
because I think we saw a lot of these funds raise capital in 2020. There was something like 100 firms that were started in early stage VC, and we're now in year 3, right? So they've kind of spent most of the dry powder, and it's a weird time for them to re-up and try to raise their second round essentially.
And even the ones that still have, there's a lot still have dry powder. they're selective.
There is dry powder, but people are more cautious.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a VC market. It's not a startup market now.
No.
So
Yeah.
they get to choose their terms. They get to,
Yeah.
to really pick the right startups and the ones that, have more closer or shorter path to profitability and cash flow positive and all that.
Do you think they're like, so we talk about like a supply and demand kind of thing? Like, is there more demand in the sense that there are more startups now than there were when you started, or is it? I
don't think so. It's so there was a really interesting report published by Carta recently, and they were showing that basically Series A funding has slowed down over the past 4 quarters dramatically, quarter over quarter. Valuations dropped significantly, amount raised dropped significantly, and I think the last quarter was the kind of the smallest amount raised, or kind of in terms of these metrics, since 2018.
Oh wow!
So it was a big deal when we saw that, and you can see how valuations even trickle down.
Right. Yeah.
1 in every 5 rounds is a down round now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's you can kind of get an idea how tough the environment is right now.
So it's really a supply issue with
and there is I believe there is money. It's just when you look at the high interest rates and kind of the risk-free return is at 5% or more, that puts a lot of pressure on the venture returns, because they need to be significantly higher and be able to really achieve that to make sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of LPs or dry powder is now sitting on the sidelines, basically waiting for the right moments or right deals. So that's why. But there's I believe there's a lot of money to be invested in, especially in climate tech. It's kind of like perfect timing now in terms of the movement around sustainability, government initiatives, incentives offered. In general, the public awareness of this issue. So
it's kind of ironic that we had so much venture capital come into the space before the IRA got passed, and now you see all this like regulatory change and like demand that's going to be created by the new law. You haven't seen a matching increase in venture come in. Yeah, and you got to imagine, like, anyone who's looking at the macro has to look at this and say, oh my gosh, like climate is going to have such good deals come out of this because there's just going to be so much money. Yeah. We have to capitalize the space. Yeah.
But I feel like also over the past decade, though, venture capital's mostly been on software-driven companies, right? And this is, I think climate tech is very different. And I don't think the venture capitalists have really understood, like, how do you actually, get your returns?
You still got to show, the industry has to show that it can generate returns. I guess where I'm coming from is like there's a rising tide is going to lift all boats factor here. Yeah. Where this is like so much, we're talking like trillions of dollars are going to come into our space in a way that wasn't guaranteed.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true.
Right?
Yeah. But I'm hoping it would also change a little bit the mentality within the venture world, right? Yeah. Because these are more industrial solutions, capital intensive solutions. Yeah. And so they will take longer, and the returns are not going to be like the returns we get from tech companies.
It could be.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And I mean, you need patient capital when you're looking at funding climate tech in the most broad sense. But there are returns to be made similar to, other kind of verticals. It's obviously, with SaaS, you're on a completely different level. With all of the startups in that space, it's really hard to find the needle in the haystack.
Unicorn, right?
Exactly, the unicorn. There's a lot of SaaS companies, and they come and go. But with deep tech, you have this deep assets and IP that's developed, and there's a lot of companies now that are not capital intensive. There's really interesting business models, financing models. That are making these kind of technologies get into the market in an effective way and kind of quickly.
Because InnovViews is not very capital intensive.
No, I mean, from the beginning, we adopted a model where every capital intensive part of the business was outsourced.
Yeah,
so when COVID hit, we didn't have like facilities, fabrication equipment, and labor that we had to deal with. We have a distributed team anyway from the beginning, so it was much easier to kind of weather the storm, and even till now, we rely on partners for fabrication, manufacturing, installation, in the most part.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I feel like the older I get, the less assets I want to own. And we're not telling my wife that. Don't tell her that. But like just as an entrepreneur, it's like, yeah, assets are an encumbrance, right?
Yeah.
You really want to go more fab light and find that, make the extra effort to be less capital intensive, because it really frees you up to put the money, where it's most valuable.
Yeah, and there's good timing where you can, for example, having assets might make more sense than not. For us, the pilot phase absolutely didn't make any sense to have our own facility or our own people doing these fabrication, because you don't have the orders, you don't have the like the sales pipeline or anything. You're still in development. But I can see now in the next few years, it'll be more cost effective to have some of that kind of manufacturing process vertically integrated, and you can start to vertically integrate parts of that process in-house, because it gives you more control over your product, the quality, the margins, the cost, a lot of things that will benefit and will be of interest to investors. So I think there is a good time, right time for where you spend and where you start to allocate and have assets.
So I guess as we talk a little bit about the Houston innovation ecosystem, what's something you're really proud of here that you've seen kind of grown up?
It's this movement towards the energy transition. It's really getting a lot of momentum, and it was really interesting to see how that movement is starting and how it's shaping up. It's amazing, and you would think that a lot of other cities could have done it, but really Houston is really perfectly positioned to lead on that front. And you hear about all the initiatives, the public and private sector coming together around that. It's really like a good story and good movement and momentum is building up around it. So it's I don't want to say that Houston was not on the map already within the kind of venture community, but it's kind of emphasizing and strengthening and that position that you see now a lot of VCs coming to Houston frequently. There's more events. Corporate VC companies and arms are coming here to look at startups at a broad scale. I mean, energy specifically, but in general, under climate tech, there's a lot of verticals that investors are interested in, and that's really great to see it here in Houston.
Have you found that there are any gaps in the ecosystem?
Yes, I mean, obviously everywhere there is. If you look at other places, whether it's Austin or the Bay Area, there are still, if you're not directly related to the energy transition, like deep into it, you'll still feel that other places are more friendly to startup companies, early stage companies, in terms of risk appetite, being open to kind of funding startups and founders that are early stage. That is still, I feel, is a gap here. I would love to see the energy transition movement leveraged to expand on that ecosystem for VCs and founders and startups in general, not just ones that are deeply rooted or deeply relevant to the energy transition.
And so I guess in many ways, like this is an efficiency innovation business model. It's not necessarily energy generation, right?
Yes.
In terms of what you're doing. So do you feel like you get pigeonholed outside of the energy transition? It's
not immediately relevant, or a lot of people don't see how it's immediately relevant. But if you think about it, when you're trying to move a city off of fossil fuels,
off of carbon,
and you're relying on the grid to be able to take all of that potential demand, a lot of grids are not going to be able to sustain that. So you're looking at, you need to reduce demand as much as transitioning that to electricity. So there's a big movement around electrifying buildings. And there's been a lot of studies and a lot of research that, a lot of cities, they cannot afford to do that. They just can't. I mean, the grid would just die, will collapse. So that's where we come in, because energy efficiency is the key to enabling building electrification and decarbonization, which is kind of part of the energy transition movement.
Yeah.
So we're not energy generating,
Yeah.
but we can help with this transition by basically reducing the demand from the building sector, which is kind of the number one, the largest sector in terms of energy consumption and carbon emissions.
I guess the conclusion here is we shouldn't be so narrow in what we do by energy
Yeah.
transition. It's really all these systems are going to evolve and change, right? As the transition happens.
Exactly.
Yeah, and for Texas, it's particularly relevant, right?
Yeah.
Because with the electricity grid issues that we've had the past couple of years.
The outages,
So,
absolutely.
Do you guys get that? Do you get this email every day from ERCOT saying, please don't keep your thermostat up?
Conserve, yeah.
Are you getting
exactly.
that?
Yeah, that's good though, because we need to be better at conserving.
Of course, yeah.
So
And
we
part of
definitely-
that is having more energy efficient building envelopes,
Yeah.
because that's keeping the heat in, keeping the cool in, keeping the heat out. So this is how you regulate the performance of the building and the temperature and all that.
Yeah.
It's a great note to close on.
Exactly.
So what do you think our audience could support you on? Any goals that you have that they could help you with?
We're trying to spread the message that energy efficiency is really important, especially for buildings. When you look at the movement around net zero, decarbonization, and the climate goals, a lot of people don't know that buildings are like a really core part of the problem, and addressing it is a big deal, especially when it comes to building facades and windows. We talk to a lot of building owners, and they don't even think about the facades or windows, because in their mind they know that it's like the only solution is to replace them, and it's like very costly, very disruptive. So there's a lot of an educational element to what we're doing to tell them, no, look at this, look at the impact. We do kind of a cost benefit analysis at the beginning, do an energy model, show them before, show them after, and show them the financials, what the impact could be, the ROI, the payback. So that's important. With spreading the message, spreading awareness is a key component that would be helpful to us. We're also raising funding, and a lot of these startups cannot succeed or cannot take these inventions or these technologies, these solutions to market, unless they have these backers at the beginning to be able to take it to market. So if any investors are interested, let us know.
Good. And where can they find you?
My email is Anas, ANAS, @Innoviews, LinkedIn, Twitter as well.
Is it still
Very
called Twitter?
responsive. X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.